Insurance fraud in the UK is reaching epidemic levels, and it's costing us billions of pounds every year. Deliberate crashes, bogus personal injury claims, even fake deaths. The fraudsters are risking more and more to make a quick killing. And every year, it's adding up to £50 to your insurance bill. Insurers are fighting back, armed with covert surveillance systems.
Everything that we do has to remain cutting edge.
Sophisticated data analysis techniques.
Without having something like this, we would always be one step behind.
And a newly formed dedicated police unit.
Police, get back!
They're catching the criminals red-handed. All those con men, scammers, cheats on the fiddle, now they're caught in the act, and claimed and shamed. Today, the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department busts into the house of a suspect.
You right, we got a warrant.
One claimer discovers that no win, no fee doesn't apply to fraud.
Somewhat surprisingly and shockingly, found that no, she was not on that bus.
And a supposedly injured fraudster's story falls apart.
The most striking thing of the 12 days footage is there was no wheelchair.
Being a fraudster is a full-time job, as one would-be conman found to his cost when he failed to keep up his deception whilst under surveillance. In 2006, lorry driver Graham Loveday was the victim of a minor road traffic incident. The details were passed to the driver's insurer. On the face of it, this was a straightforward low-speed collision, as CEO David Slater revealed.
Mr. Loveday was driving along the road and he passed a petrol station, and as he passed the petrol station, our policyholder pulled out and hit the rear wheel. Mr. Loveday initially went for a medical report, and that report initially said that he got a whiplash injury with some bruising, and that the whole injury would resolve itself inside 5 to 8 months.
So far, so simple. Graham stood to gain the standard amount of compensation for whiplash, around £2,500. But 12 months after the accident, things seemed to take a dramatic turn for the worse.
Then subsequently went for a second medical report about a year later, and in fact at that medical report the doctor was unable to assess him because he said he was unable to get out of his wheelchair.
It was an astonishing development. Mr. Loveday's condition had deteriorated to the point where he claimed he often required a wheelchair, and even on good days had difficulty getting around.
And he subsequently claimed that he was pretty much wheelchair bound, and obviously had constant pain all the time, and was unable to do many of the basic tasks of everyday living, and needed extensive care from his wife.
It wasn't just physical injuries. He also said he was suffering psychologically.
Mr. Loveday also claimed that he had a phobia of car travel. So he literally said that if he got into a car, that would immediately make him vomit.
With such extensive injuries, the claim for treatment and care was mounting.
Our legal advice was that in this case, the cost to us would have been approximately £1 million.
The insurer was becoming suspicious.
I think the first thing that rang alarm bells to us with this claim was when we received that second medical report. Certainly if someone has got an injury so severe that they're going to be wheelchair bound, normally that would be apparent very early on.
It just didn't add up.
We had these two medical reports showing completely different injuries, so clearly we wanted to get to the truth of whether the injury really was anywhere near as severe as he was now alleging.
The insurer went straight to a group of specialist undercover investigators, led by Tim Young.
Ultimately, our task is to gain an objective slice of their life. So it's simply a case of turning up and maximising the amount of footage that we can get so that others within the legal process can form a good objective opinion of someone's capabilities.
Their mission was to covertly film Graham Loveday to see if he was as injured as he claimed.
The Graham Loveday case centred around the fact that we were dealing with an individual who was purportedly suffering from some form of physical disability, but not only that, there was psychological trauma as well. Around the area of his home address and around the kind of the overall area, he was presenting himself as a male who was actually quite disabled and walked in such a way as to suggest that he had a fairly significant disability.
What they saw at first seemed to fit with his statements, but then they got a tip-off that changed everything.
We've been informed that he was likely to be going on holiday, so we placed him under surveillance over a given period of time.
Claimant is now getting inside the driver's seat.
The man, who claimed to be sick when he was inside a car, was observed driving for several hours to his holiday destination.
He was found to travel from where he lived in South Wales all the way to the Isle of Wight.
Now with a left indication. Left indication.
It's a significant journey for someone who is purportedly nervous of driving and incapable, I guess, of sitting for long periods of time as well.
The surprises continued. Far from appearing tired or anxious after the lengthy journey, on arrival he seemed rejuvenated and was walking freely.
The contrast in his abilities and his overall demeanour was very significant. He was totally relaxed.
As he unwinds in what he thinks is the safety of a secluded campsite, he starts to demonstrate signs of his true physical ability.
I think that one of the most interesting pieces of footage that we gained was him lifting a generator.
He's now lifting something heavy out of awning.
And actually starting the petrol generator, so like a lawnmower, you know, starting the engine in that way.
It seems to be pulling at something, i.e. a generator pull cord to start.
On his return from holiday, he continues to perform a variety of strenuous physical activities.
There were a number of other specific examples. So, for example, he's seen servicing a car, which obviously involves a lot of bending over, which clearly you would not expect someone who's wheelchair bound to be able to do.
The length of the surveillance meant they hadn't just caught him on a good day.
There was 12 days footage in total. We'd obviously been told that Mr. Loveday was wheelchair bound. He needed a wheelchair if he travelled any distance at all. And the most striking thing of the 12 days footage is there was no wheelchair. It was very clear to us in this case that Mr. Loveday was grossly exaggerating the extent of his injuries. It was really rather difficult not to be absolutely certain that this was a fairly audacious attempt at a major fraud.
They had all the evidence they needed. The next step was to bring Graham Loveday to justice.
This case ended up in court. We felt it was really important to make it clear that Saga Insurance is not going to tolerate frauds of this type. Judge found Mr. Loveday guilty. Mr. Loveday was sentenced to 9 months in prison. Yeah, I think Mr. Loveday's motivation was undoubtedly agreed to try and get some more money. We certainly foiled him in this case, yes.
A pair of claimers ashamed on camera.
Our expert didn't accept that there was any possibility whatsoever that they'd been injured.
In the fight against the growing problem of insurance fraud, an elite squad have come together to form IFED, the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department.
Insurance fraud isn't a victimless crime. £50 of each premium you pay each year goes to the fraudsters. We have been set up to tackle that problem.
This dedicated team works tirelessly to bang up the crooks and con men getting rich off other people's money.
Please get back!
It is our intention to create a climate of fear for the fraudster. There's every chance that an IFED detective may come knocking on their door to arrest them for committing an insurance fraud.
Police, don't move, stay where you are!
By April 2012, after only 6 months of operating, they had already busted 80 fraudsters, adding up to £12 million of fraud under investigation.
These people are criminals. These are nasty people. They don't go out to work on a Monday morning like most people do. Their work is submitting insurance fraud claims.
Today, the IFED team, led by DS Mark Forster,
You all right?
has come to raid the home of a suspect wanted for questioning about car insurance fraud.
But this particular individual accepted numerous motor insurance policies. We think somewhere in the region, just this one company, somewhere in the region of 60 or 70 motor insurance policies. The insurer puts the loss at somewhere in the region of £50,000.
The large number of motor insurance policies belonging to the suspect has led IFED to believe this indicates fraudulent activity.
Right.
They want to arrest the suspect and question him in detail about what's going on.
Got the warrant then?
They're not expecting the inhabitants of the house to be cooperative and are ready to break their way in if needed.
Open up space! Put a door in 3 seconds! Police, get back! Police! Get back! Stay where you are!
You all right, we got a warrant. Do you want to get yourself up, Donny?
Get back, buddy.
You're decent at the moment under there?
The first person they find is the mother of the suspect.
She's laying in bed, she's just getting up now, and we're obviously speaking to her to try and find out where her son is. We'll crack on with a search now. We've got a warrant to execute a search at this premises, okay, and that's been authorised by the City London Magistrates Court. It's in relation to fraud-related offences concerning your son.
Well, he lives at... I kicked him out, actually.
Do you know the address where he's staying at the moment?
No, I don't.
Do you have a contact number for him? That'll be a good start for 10.
While Mark questions the suspect's mother in the lounge, the team starts searching the rest of the house. The hunt is on for documentary evidence linking the suspect to the fraud, so the case stands up in court. Unconvinced that the suspect has actually moved out, they focus on an upstairs room that might be his bedroom. But the first thing they find could be proof of an altogether different sort of crime: illegal drugs.
So there's cannabis in which bedroom?
There's 2 bags there. These are all empty bags with bits and remnants in.
There's an amount of cannabis upstairs in that bedroom, and there's a small amount down here as well. So obviously we're going to be seizing that and speaking to them more about who's around ownership possession of that.
The search continues. The next thing they discover is a hidden safe concealed behind a fireplace.
Do you last access this safe? Whose safe is it?
The key's been left in the door, so it's a simple job to open it up. Could this be where the evidence they need is stashed?
I'm arresting you on suspicion of possessing a controlled drug, cannabis.
Some chancers take advantage of genuine collisions to cheat their way to money they don't deserve. But insurers and transport companies are fighting back, using every high-tech tool at their disposal. CCTV is one of them. From time to time, buses are involved in minor incidents. Huyton bus station was the scene of one such incident. Valda Grant handled the case.
It was a number 15 bus travelling into Huyton bus station in the northwest. The bus was going slowly into the bus station, and there were some railings on his left-hand side, and he caught the railings with the bus as he was pulling into the bus station.
Not long after, the bus company heard from 2 of the passengers who'd been on board at the time.
These were 2 17-year-old passengers on the bus, and they both claimed they'd got whiplash injury. 2 with whiplash injury. One said she'd a shoulder injury because she banged her shoulder against the window.
This was an unexpected outcome, which didn't tally with the slow speed of the impact. The bus company wasted no time in checking the onboard CCTV to see if the footage supported the claims. The women can clearly be seen on the bus, but at no point do they seem to sustain any injury from a collision. In fact, the incident is so low impact, the passengers aren't even seen moving. When the women leave the bus, they even appear to be smiling.
When we got our own medical expert, we sent him the CCTV, plus the claimant's witness statements where they explain what happened in the accident and how they were injured. Our expert didn't accept that there was any possibility whatsoever that they'd been injured.
The civil claim proceeded to court, and the bus company used the footage to make their case. Luckily, justice prevailed.
The court dismissed the claim, and the claimants didn't receive any damages.
Without CCTV cameras, it could have been a very different result, and the two women might have got away with their false claim.
It is a sad state of affairs that you need the CCTV, but it would be sadder if we didn't have them, because we would not be able to fight these claims.
When it comes to trying their luck with bus companies, some claimers are even more shameless than the previous pair. At least they were on the bus in question. The next story concerns a would-be fraudster who attempted to claim for injuries that she couldn't possibly have suffered. Jonathan Crooks, the manager of Transcare Law, works for the bus company involved and investigated the case.
Anissa Nasser was in Queen Street bus station in Liverpool.
It's a busy station, and one of the buses was hit at low speed by another bus. Not long afterwards, the company was contacted by Anissa Nasser.
When she presented a claim for personal injury on the basis that she had been an occupant of the bus when it was hit. She claimed that she was jolted and that she suffered whiplash-type injuries to her neck.
The case was passed on to one of the bus company's own claims handlers.
Our claims handler will have checked the CCTV footage from the inside of the bus to make sure that Anissa Nasser was indeed on the bus when it was hit.
What they saw blew her claim out of the water.
Somewhat surprisingly and shockingly, found that no, she was not on that bus. In fact, the camera showed her standing in the bus station watching what was happening.
Watching what was happening and clearly coming up with a scheme to scam money from the bus company. The pictures show her stood outside the bus, watching the impact, and then getting on the bus that was hit after the collision had happened. The CCTV pictures were more than enough evidence for the bus company to reject her claim, but they didn't stop there.
Also, what she didn't realise was that she wasn't in a no-lose situation, because once we'd rejected her claim for compensation, we were determined not to let matters lie there, and that we would try and, as a deterrence for other people, take her to court.
It was impossible to argue with the evidence from the CCTV camera, and Anissa Nasser was found guilty.
The sentence for Miss Nasser was a 4-month suspended prison sentence, 180 hours community service, and she had to pay the prosecution legal costs as well.
But perhaps she's paid an even greater cost than the sentence itself.
She's got a criminal record now. A lot of doors are now shut to her in terms of future employment, applications for mortgages, etc., etc. People just seem to think that they can take an opportunistic pop at people like us, and they live to regret it.
Technology is a key weapon in the fight against insurance fraud. Our next would-be swindler was caught out when she failed to cover her tracks and left an electronic footprint leading to her downfall. In 2011, Jodie Jackman was one of the drivers in a serious car accident. It involved 2 motors and a total of 7 people, including the other driver, Katie Ashcroft. Jodie reported the accident to her insurer and accepted liability. Claire Laver is a lawyer who worked on the case with the insurer.
7 claims for personal injury and other vehicle-related losses were made. The third-party driver received a sum of money for the damage to her vehicle, as did the policyholder, and in total that was around about £11,000.
This payout covered the damage to both cars and the personal injury claims for all 7 people involved. That appeared to be that, until, due to an unrelated matter, Jodie was suspended from her admin job. A routine trawl through her work email account by her employers revealed a surprising email exchange.
Where they had suggested getting involved in fabricating an accident and making a fraudulent claim.
Swiftcover's Chief Claims Officer, Robin Reeves, was passed the full details of the incriminating exchange. One email from Katie to Jodie reads,
"All you got to do is carry out instructions when given. You've got 3 in your car. Looks better if we both get handled by different people."
Jodie replies,
"I'm scared, me."
Katie reassures her.
"I'm scared too. Both the guys have done it before, so it's sweet."
It was very clear from the emails that this was a deliberate attempt to defraud an insurer by creating an accident that didn't take place and for 7 people to make personal injury claims that they didn't suffer.
Further digging revealed the motive behind the fraudulent claim was financial.
The 2 girls were undergoing some financial strain at the time. One of them had a loan with a loan shark, another one had some £5,000 worth of debt.
They were desperately in need of the £11,000 payout from the insurer. It turned out they had maximised their money by persuading 5 other people to pretend they were passengers and put in fake injury claims. All 7 were taken to court.
The result of the court case was that 7 pleaded guilty to conspiracy to defraud, and of those, 3 received a 12-week custodial sentence, suspended for 1 year, and the other 4 received a 6-month community order. This seemed to be an opportunity for them to make some quick cash. The result is it didn't work out that way. They got caught. They lost their jobs, they have a criminal record, and it sends a very clear message to fraudsters out there that we will find them and we will do all we can to protect innocent, law-abiding policyholders.
But the story didn't end there. The insurance company decided to pursue the women for the money they cheated out of them.
They will have to pay back the £11,000 that was paid to them by Swift Cover in the end anyway. So it was a completely pointless exercise which has left them much worse off than they'd intended.
The Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department, IFED, has come to arrest a suspect they believe is involved in car insurance fraud. He's nowhere to be seen, but they've chanced upon a hidden safe, which they're hoping will contain some of the evidence they need to make the case stand up.
Do you last access this safe?
As they go through the contents, they find an array of checkbooks and documents, which they bag up for further investigation.
It's a security measure to make sure that should they be subject to the burglary, that nobody gets all their banking details, all their checkbooks, credit cards, passports, etc. Quite ironic, really.
But there's still no sign of the suspect. IFED persuaded the mother to hand over a contact number for her son, but they've had no luck with that either.
Just going straight through to voicemail. We've left him a number of voicemails, asking him basically to get in touch with us, to basically get himself here.
Their persistence pays off, and he eventually rings back.
Where are you? Sheffield. What are you doing up there? What vehicle are you driving? How are you going to get in?
IFED has done their homework on the suspect. When they eventually make contact, they deliberately reveal some of the information they have, so he knows they're onto him.
I know which vehicles you've got access to. I just want to know which vehicle you're going to come in.
Meanwhile, the family guard dog seems to be having an off day.
Full focus, brilliant. So you're going to be here in an hour? Don't muck me about, I'm trusting you now to turn up here within the hour. Lovely, see you then.
Usually we find that that's enough to draw him back to home, as it were, especially when his mum's here on her own.
Although the suspect has promised to return home, there's still no sign of him after 45 minutes. The IFED team is starting to lose patience. Suddenly, another call comes in, but it's not from the suspect. It's from a man who says he's his lawyer.
I'm going to put the phone down in a minute, sir, right?
The lawyer explains that the suspect won't be coming to the house as promised. The IFED team thinks they smell a rat.
If he's a professional solicitor, he's just laughing down the phone to me. Anyway, that's a nice distraction for us. Where were we?
Their search is turning up an ever-increasing quantity of drugs.
While we're sitting here, there's a waft of, quite a strong waft of cannabis coming from just behind where my colleague sat there, and so that's like the third and fourth sort of small quantity of cannabis we found in the house now, in sort of 3 or 4 different rooms.
With drugs uncovered in several locations around the property, it's important that IFED investigates the illegal substances thoroughly. The mother is the only person in the house, and Mark takes the decision to arrest her in connection with the drugs.
She's the only one on the premises and there's drugs all over it, so she can come in.
I'm arresting you on suspicion of possessing a controlled drug, cannabis, and on suspicion
What? Tiny
of
mouth?
conspiring to defraud. The cannabis that's been found in this house. So.
What? Right, a joint.
What? There's been cannabis found in this
Yeah,
house.
a joint.
Up
Yeah.
there. Yeah, it's an offence.
Just then, the suspect calls again.
Hello, is that you? I've had a few phone calls from Mohammed. He tells me that you want to turn up at the police station, not come here. And the time, but you've got 15 minutes to get here, so you've run out of time.
For arresting me.
Why am I arresting her? For cannabis possession and conspiracy to defraud. Your timing couldn't have been more impeccable. She's just been arrested and she's going to the police station. Are you coming to the home or to the police station?
There's scales, there's grinders used for grinding down cannabis resin and bits and pieces like that. Scales for weighing the drugs out.
Suddenly, there's a commotion at the door as someone tries to enter.
Oh, mate, hang on. Who's that? Come on, fella.
It's her son, but unfortunately not the son IFED is after.
Yeah, well, it's me, Dick, man. What can I do? I've just woke up, man. Get that out of my face.
Although they didn't get their hands on the suspect, IFED has found significant amounts of potential evidence to help with their case. It's been a successful raid. Mark is confident they'll eventually get their man.
He is a very well-known person and he will come sooner or later to our attention or to the police's attention, and he'll get arrested sooner rather than later if he fails to give himself up today. So we will catch up with him eventually. Would have been nice to have got him today, but like I say, we've secured all the evidence from the house, so we're not going to lose anything in relation to our investigation.
The police eventually arrested the suspect and questioned him about the alleged fraud. He and his mother are currently on bail, and the investigation is ongoing. In the short amount of time that IFED has been in existence, the team has had a huge impact, investigating over 300 suspected insurance scams and taking the fight to the fraudsters. Insurance fraud in the UK is reaching epidemic levels, and it's costing us billions of pounds every year. Deliberate crashes, bogus personal injury claims, even phantom pets. The fraudsters are risking more and more to make a quick killing. And every year, it's adding up to £50 to your insurance bill. Insurers are fighting back, armed with covert surveillance systems.
The subject out the vehicle.
Sophisticated data analysis techniques. And highly skilled dedicated police units.
Stay where you are!
They're catching the criminals red-handed. All those con men, scammers and cheats on the fiddle, now they're caught in the act. And claim and shame. Today, a country pub goes up in smoke and things get heated for a pair of fire-starting fraudsters.
It showed Dean and Melinda looking for the bag that we had recovered, and a most unusual response to that, almost hysterical.
The Specialist Police Unit IFED shuts down a gang of motor insurance fraudsters.
I don't think they expected to get caught so quickly, but ultimately most fraudsters will get caught.
And the conman's elaborate stag do cover story starts to unravel.
Despite travelling to Edinburgh for a stag weekend, there was no luggage whatsoever in the minibus.
In July 2011, a huge fire broke out at the Toll House pub in Lymington in the New Forest. The flames spread rapidly, cutting off people trapped on the upper floor. The emergency services were called to what had quickly become a life or death situation. Justin Norris is from Hampshire Police.
The fire was in the early hours of the morning, and we attended the scene within 5 minutes of the call from Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service.
With the fire threatening to rage out of control, the first priority was to get everyone out safely. Duncan White is a crew manager with Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service who attended the scene.
It was a very severe fire. You could see why the people were trapped in the upstairs rooms. The fire in the stairwell was the reason why the people were trapped at the first floor, because it compromised their means of escape.
At great risk to their own safety, the fire officers entered the building and managed to get everyone out, undoubtedly saving their lives. According to the emergency call from Dean and Melinda Thomas, who owned the pub, the devastating blaze was the result of foul play.
They suspected a burglary or somebody who tried to break into their premises. We started to treat it as a scene of a crime.
The fire was so intense, it was a miracle that no one had been seriously hurt.
The whole pub was completely 100% smoke damaged.
With the blaze finally out, the police began their investigation by talking to the owners about the events of that night, in particular the suspected burglary.
Dean had been awoken, had come downstairs, having heard a noise of smashing glass, looked around the premises, didn't find anything to start with, went back upstairs. Within half an hour, the fire alarms had gone off. He then alerted the rest of the people in the house, and he discovered a fire downstairs.
Dean Thomas believed that the burglar was after the pub's takings.
He reported that some money had been stolen from downstairs and that they tried to cover their tracks by causing this fire.
However, there was a fundamental problem with his version of events.
It's highly unusual for a burglar to break into a premise and to set fire to it without any other motive or reason to do so.
Dean's story simply didn't ring true, and suspicions were immediately aroused. The police examined the scene of the fire for further evidence, starting with the smashed window, which, according to Dean, was the burglar's entry point.
You couldn't have possibly got into the premises without disturbing the glass fragments on this windowsill. They weren't disturbed at all.
Their next discovery threw even more doubt on Dean's story.
We found a petrol can that was recovered from in an outhouse that had been concealed behind some items, behind a case, which was unusual as well.
This tied in with evidence from the fire officers who'd fought the blaze.
In a normal domestic fire, it's a grey smoke, but this was a very black smoke.
The colour of the smoke and the discovery of the hidden petrol can seemed to indicate that the fire had been fuelled by an accelerant such as petrol. Dean's story was unravelling fast, and the police looked into the couple's finances as a possible motivation for arson.
It became really apparent quite quickly that Thomases were in significant debt.
Evidence was mounting on all sides that the fire had been deliberately started by the Thomases for an insurance payout, but conclusive proof was lacking until a chance discovery in the grounds of the property.
We recover a bag of clothing. We don't know whose clothing this is, but we discover it's outer clothing, sort of tracksuit bottoms and a top, and some domestic gloves. We didn't know why it was there, we didn't know whose it was, but we suspected it was something to do with the fire.
Sensing a chance to catch the culprits red-handed, the police set up surveillance of the area with a hidden camera.
We thought that whoever put the bag there might come back to the scene to try and recover it, to dispose of it, because we believed at the time this was the bag of clothing that had been used to start the fire.
Unlike fraudsters, the camera never lies, and the surveillance footage meant that Dean Thomas's story went up in smoke.
It showed Dean and Melinda looking for the bag that we had recovered, and a most unusual response to that. Almost hysterical. It looks like they're arguing about it, and Melinda is throwing her arms around a little bit as well.
Melinda was confronted by the police, and even then the lies continued.
She said in an interview to us that the reason why she reacted that way was because she believed police officers had disturbed the grave of her dog.
But she convinced no one, and it was obvious that her hysterical response was because she knew they'd been found out. The fire had been started deliberately, and they hadn't done a very good job of covering their tracks.
It was quite clear that the motive was financial. They had wanted to get out of the contract with the brewery, whose premise as it was, and already done that, already asked to do that prior to the fire taking place.
The case eventually reached court, but despite the weight of evidence against them, unbelievably, the couple maintained their innocence.
During the trial, they pleaded not guilty, and it was a jury that convicted them. Dean Thomas was sentenced to 6 years in prison, and Melinda Thomas was sentenced to 3 years in prison.
Not only had they been driven by greed, But worse, they'd endangered the lives of the people in the pub and the firefighters who put out the fire. The heavy sentences reflected the seriousness of their crime.
Unfortunately for them, unfortunately for everyone else, the truth came out and we found out what happened in the end.
A fraud gang is scuppered after making an outrageous claim.
To put a claim in on a vehicle that they were driving and or involved with that did not have damage consistent to what's been portrayed is rather foolish.
And its insurance company in one corner, fake Olympic boxer in the other.
It's not untypical of insurance fraudsters to have aliases. I guess what's surprising in this case is that he sought to bring such attention to himself.
Combating the ever-increasing threat of insurance fraud is an elite police squad known as IFED, the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department.
IFED is a 35-strong unit that works tirelessly to hunt down and prosecute insurance fraudsters wherever they may be throughout England and Wales.
From now on, fraudsters need to watch their back.
In only 18 months, we've arrested over 300 people. We will start to see a reduction in the insurance fraud in this country, which is ultimately what we're aiming for. It's highly likely now, if you commit any insurance fraud, you will get caught.
In 2012, IFED travelled to Torquay to carry out a raid on a gang of fraudsters believed to be behind various multi-vehicle accidents. The collisions were staged in order to cash in on motor insurance policies. It all started with a seemingly innocuous accident in 2009. Mike Brown from Direct Line was on the case.
The accident in 2009 involved 3 vehicles. One was driven by Mr. Baker, a second vehicle driven by Mr. Cash, and a third vehicle driven by Miss Shears. Mr. Baker lost control of his vehicle and collided with the 2 vehicles driven by Miss Shears and Mr. Cash.
At that stage, there was nothing to suggest fraud.
No suspicious circumstances surrounding that claim. It entered the claims process and the claims were eventually settled for all 3 vehicles.
DC Kate Sibley from IFED also worked on the case.
Claims were going in for personal injury, damage to cars, damage to property within the cars, loss of earnings, hire vehicles, whatever basically they could put a claim in for, they were putting a claim in.
In total, all 3 claims were settled for approximately £15,000.
And there the matter would have rested, had it not been for another accident 2 years later. Striking similarities to the claim from 2009 led to an investigation being launched.
Mr. Baker appeared to be the offending driver on both occasions. There was 3 vehicles again involved. All parties knew each other, raised concerns.
All those involved in the accidents were linked and alarm bells started to ring. The cars from the second accident were then examined by an expert employed by the insurers.
The crash investigator basically said how they're saying the accident happened didn't match up with the damage to the vehicles. So in his opinion, it was unlikely that it actually took place.
To put a claim in on a vehicle that they were driving and or involved with that did not have damage consistent to what's being portrayed is rather foolish.
They'd made a big mistake, and this alerted the insurers to other aspects of the claim which raised suspicions, not least the huge amount of money involved.
In total, £80,000 was the amount of claims that would have been paid if we had not have intervened.
That intervention came in the form of an early morning IFED raid. The team started with a visit to Jonathan Baker, the man who'd driven into the back of the other vehicles in both the accidents. It was 6:30 in the morning when the IFED team arrived at the address. The father of the suspect came out to meet them and wanted to know what was going on.
I'm from the City of London Police. It's my ID, sir. We're looking for Mr. Jonathan Baker. What's this for? We want to speak to him in connection to an insurance fraud that we believe he's involved in. That's all the detail I can give you, sir.
Right.
Okay. I can speak to him more about it, but I can't yourself. I take it you are, sorry, you're his father.
I'm father, yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
he is.
He's in bed and he doesn't need to be disturbed at the moment.
Well, we need to speak to him, sir.
He revealed that his son was in, and Baker eventually came to talk to IFED.
I understand you're off work at the moment.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, we need to speak to you today. Okay, we need to take you to the local to Torquay and interview you in relation to a matter that's been referred to us.
Right.
In relation to what we suspect is insurance fraud dating back to January of last year.
Right, okay.
Okay. That's it, basically.
Yeah, Jonathan Baker, you're under arrest, 7 o'clock, okay? You have standing man, thanks for not mentioning any question. Subject to unimportant. If you could do so, mate, give him evidence, okay?
He was taken down to the local police station for further questioning.
All right, mate, just take your seat in there behind the passenger seat, please.
While the IFED team was travelling to their next raid location, they got some good news from the station.
He's just been booked in and just been put in a cell. He just came out with it, indicated that he knew what it was all about and said that he didn't see any point in lying about any involvement. So I don't know what he's going to say on the interview. We obviously didn't question him any further. But he asked if we were picking up any of the others that were involved, was his exact words. So what exactly that means, I don't know.
It was the breakthrough the case needed. Although the raid had started well, there were still 2 crucial arrests to make, and the team had to stay focused. When they arrived at the next address, they immediately knew they were at the right place, because parked outside was a vehicle that was central to the case.
Oh, his car's there. That Mazda is pretty much what it's all about.
There's a bright green Mazda RX-7, which had been modified at the garage. It won numerous awards for the modifications to it and was on the front of several magazines.
The car belonged to Carter Oram, the man involved in the second crash. IFED believed that this had been deliberately staged to fund expensive modification work on his Mazda. Despite the presence of his car, the suspect believed to be at the second location wasn't Carter Oram. It was a man thought to have allowed his details to be used for one of the fraudulent insurance claims. The team secured the exits and prepared to enter through the main door.
We're in.
After they'd identified themselves, the suspect cooperated by letting them in.
Firstly, okay, I need to speak to you today regarding an allegation that's been made where it's alleged that you're involved in a conspiracy to defraud insurance companies. Right? Hear me out, yeah? Okay, so in relation to that offence and that allegation, I'm arresting you on suspicion of conspiracy to defraud and we'll be looking to interview you later on this morning.
Although he wasn't one of the ringleaders, a search of the property revealed that he was involved in more than just suspected insurance fraud.
A number of things were seized there, including the cultivation of cannabis, which the local police dealt with.
How many plants you got? 9. I'm further arresting you on suspicion of cultivation of cannabis.
I'm proper scared now.
It's all right.
I don't like dealing with people on the streets. I smoke weed like I've got my own bombs. I just sit in here and smoke weed.
The team then moved on to the final and most important location, a garage called Shell Shot, which was linked to all the suspects and all the cars.
When we delved deeper into the second claim in 2011, it became apparent that Shell Shot were clearly involved in some form of fraudulent activity.
The whole fraud centred around this main garage, Shell Shot, and all the vehicles either were from there or passed through there, but were borrowed and used in the contrived accidents and then done up and returned to their rightful owners or paid for by the insurance companies to be repaired.
Shell Shot was owned by Carter Oram, the owner of the Mazda, and Richard Cash. Both of these men were directly involved in the induced collision. And it was here that the IFED team hoped to apprehend their final suspect, Carter Oram.
Listen, Jared, hello, mate. I'm Mark Fulson from City London Police, okay, Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department.
Right.
Okay. I need to speak to you about an allegation that's been made, okay, where the allegation is that you have conspired with others to defraud the insurance company, all right, namely the RBS, all right? So in relation to that, okay, I'm going to have to arrest you, okay? You don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later rely on in court. Okay. Anything you do say may be given evidence. And that's in relation, like I say, conspiracy to defraud, okay? We'll have to take you away now, okay? Is your boss here, or are you in charge, or whatever?
I'm in charge, yeah.
Their hunch that he'd be at work paid off, and he was taken away for further questioning.
Right, stick you in the cage, mate. I'm going to take you back to Torquay. All right, jump in.
The team had made 3 arrests and recovered a wealth of evidence, but the complexity of the fraud meant that there were still people to track down.
The other suspects were arrested later on in Devon, and one suspect attended Bishopsgate Police Station voluntarily.
IFED's swift action ensured that the scam was shut down before the fraud could get any bigger. By April 2013, IFED had collected enough evidence to bring the main players to justice. Baker was sent down for 6 months, and Richard Cash for 14. Carter Oram received a 6-month jail term suspended for 12 months. Jennifer Shears, for her involvement in the first crash, was handed a 2-month prison sentence, suspended for 12 months.
Direct line groups has a zero tolerance to fraudulent insurance activity. I don't think they expected to get caught so quickly, but ultimately most fraudsters will get caught.
In 2012, Olympic fever was everywhere. For athletes who'd been chosen to represent their countries, this was the fulfillment of a long-held ambition. This was especially true for one young Afghani man living in West London. Against all the odds, Daz Siddiqui had made the Afghan boxing squad, and his inspirational story was starting to gain attention. In an article in The Sun, he was quoted as saying, "I know I won't be one of the favourites to win a medal, but being a competitor at the 2012 Olympics seemed just an impossible dream." He was right, but not in the way he intended. The whole thing was a total fabrication. Siddiqui was actually a serial fraudster and fantasist. Tom Gardner from Aviva worked on the case.
It's not untypical of insurance fraudsters to have aliases. I guess what's surprising in this case is that he sought to bring such attention to himself.
In truth, Daz Siddiqui was a conman who lived in a fantasy world. He'd invented multiple personas to cheat money out of insurance companies, but his lies were uncovered by Aviva's fraud detection team, who spotted a number of suspicious claims.
We were able to identify matches between addresses and bank accounts, which originally alerted us to the fraud. And as we investigated that further, we were able to unravel the full scale of his fraud.
He'd set up a web of fake identities.
Majid Siddiqui went by a number of aliases, including Daz Siddiq, Owen Hart, and Kevin Heartbreak.
But Siddiqui's fraud went much further than just inventing fake names. DC John Hurley from the City of London's Police Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department also worked on the case.
He tried to cover his tracks to some extent by changing his name regularly by deed poll. In a 2-year period, he had anything up to 6 to 8 names. In fact, I imagine that he has got one name that he keeps to himself, but he's been known by so many different names that perhaps only he will ever know what his real name is.
But he didn't stop at fake identities. His financial arrangements revealed a web of lies too.
In total, we were able to identify 23 bank accounts. The bank accounts were used in the first place to obtain insurance under bogus names and addresses, and then also later to receive payments from claims.
Siddiqui was committing fraud on a massive scale.
So in total, we're aware of 46 claims which were presented for bogus injuries, which on a full liability basis would have had a value of about £500,000.
Siddiqui's fraudulent claims primarily involved car accidents that had never happened, with multiple occupants who never existed. He would then claim for car repair costs and personal injury compensation.
Mr. Siddiqui was not terribly sophisticated. He created a company that handled all these claims, but foolishly or otherwise, claimed that company was both restoring the vehicles, and he would also make personal injury claims and rent vehicles. And so to people who've worked in insurance fraud for a number of years, these things stick out.
Once they'd collected all the evidence they could, the insurers handed over their findings to IFED to take the investigation to the next stage.
There's some things they can't do and that police officers have to do, including tracing him through his bank accounts and through names and aliases that he'd given. Once we'd traced all these activities and put them together through mobile phone records and bank account details, it was just really a question of catching him in and making sure that he was caught red-handed, as the expression goes.
By now, there was enough evidence to move in and arrest him.
On the day of the raid, when we went in, he was watching the TV. And one of the things that was strangest to us is that amongst his various aliases and his various guises, he'd said that he was an Olympic boxer. And he was actually watching the Olympics when we came in. It was the rowing. So we asked him about that. You know, aren't you supposed to be boxing for the country? And he said, oh yes, he'd injured himself. So he couldn't even be straight with us at that stage, even there standing in his pants.
The IFED team was able to collect a wealth of evidence.
Surrounding him were the tools of his trade. He had mobile phones with post-it notes on them in all the different names, so that if that phone went off, he'd instantly know who he was supposed to be.
With so many personas, it was hard for Siddiqui to keep track of who had put in what claim. The case proceeded to court, and Siddiqui was brought to justice.
He was charged with 11 counts of false representation under the Fraud Act and also 1 count of holding a fake national ID card.
Perhaps realising that for once he should tell the truth, Siddiqui pleaded guilty.
He got 18 months, which, considering he'd spent 2 years actually doing the crimes, he had at least 18 months to regret it.
His elaborate fantasy existence had finally been brought to an end, and he had no one to blame but himself, whoever that was.
I do wonder at the end of it, who actually knows the real Daz Siddiqui?
Things you expect on a stag night. To get a bit drunk, and maybe round the evening off with a sing-song. One thing you don't expect is whiplash, but that's just what happened on Stephen Paul's stag do. The party had barely left Newcastle before festivities came to an abrupt halt, thanks to their minibus hitting a car. Aviva's Tom Gardner was yet again on the case and investigated the claim.
Mr. Paul took out a new policy with us to insure his minibus and then contacted us several weeks later to report that he'd been in a collision with another vehicle.
Elaine Ibbotson worked for the insurer's solicitors.
It was suggested that there were a group of 14 men on their way to a stag party in Edinburgh. They were travelling in the minibus, and it was alleged that shortly after starting their journey, the minibus driver had left the main road north and had pulled off, I think, to visit a shop. Shortly after leaving the main road on the approach to a roundabout, it was alleged that the minibus collided with the rear of a car.
I believe 6 ambulances attended the scene. All of the people were treated at hospital.
The accident resulted in multiple injuries, primarily whiplash. It wasn't long before the insurers heard from the would-be partygoers on the minibus.
In total, 15 claims were presented for whiplash injuries, which on a full liability basis at the time would be potentially worth over £100,000.
Because it was such a huge sum of money, the team began to look more closely at the claim. And what they found called the whole stag party story into question.
In the first place, just the number and severity of the injuries proportionate to the accident. In the second place, that the accident happened so soon after a new policy was taken out.
There's always an element of suspicion when every single occupant of both vehicles involved in a collision claims to have sustained almost identical injuries. It wasn't a huge impact one way you'd expect every single person to have been injured.
The lawyers decided to talk to all the main players and immediately encountered inconsistencies. The main claimant kept changing small details in his story.
His account really didn't ring true at all.
And there were also concerns from the police officers who had attended the accident.
Quite clearly they felt something wasn't right with the situation as they arrived at the scene.
The investigation continued, and a vehicle assessor was sent to look at the damaged minibus.
One of the things that our engineers observed when they inspected the minibus was that some of the damage appeared quite old.
Serious questions were now being asked, not least why the men had set off for a meet-up with no spare clothes.
It also emerged that despite travelling to Edinburgh for a stag weekend, there was no luggage whatsoever in the minibus.
Piece by piece, the evidence was stacking up. Their story was falling apart. It seemed that the group had conspired to create a bogus accident so they could submit a massive insurance claim. The investigation was then widened to include those travelling in the car.
It became apparent that there were connections between the occupants of the two vehicles that were identified through social networking websites.
The confirmation that they knew each other was telling, but the final straw was a CCTV clip of the crash site, which showed that the accident had never occurred.
What we believe happened is that the two vehicles were damaged away from the scene, and then the accident was staged at some point and debris put onto the road to create the impression that an accident had occurred.
The stag weekend in Edinburgh had been invented as a cover story for an audacious con trick. But it had all fallen apart like a late-night kebab. By now there was enough evidence to take the culprits to court.
15 of the 16 people pleaded guilty and received suspended sentences. One person pleaded not guilty and he was tried by jury and later convicted.
The party was well and truly over for the stag do, and the only cause for celebration was that time had been called on a massive insurance scam. Insurance fraud in the UK has hit epidemic levels. It's costing us over £2 billion every year. That's almost £6 million every day. Deliberate crashes, bogus personal injuries, even phantom pets. The fraudsters are risking more and more to make a quick killing, and every year it's adding over £50 to your insurance bill. But insurers are fighting back, exposing 15 fake claims every hour. Armed with covert surveillance systems,
that's the subject out the vehicle,
sophisticated data analysis techniques, and a highly skilled, dedicated police unit.
Police, don't move, stay where you are!
They're catching the criminals red-handed.
Just don't lie to us.
All those con men, scammers, and cheats on the fiddle are now caught in the act and claimed and shamed. Today, a staggering personal injury scam that was fueled by lies and greed.
Her claim had risen to approximately £740,000.
An IFED raid develops into a drug bust.
It's something that I've not seen before in 9 years of policing.
And the extraordinary lengths that a mother of three went to in order to cash in.
She forged the signature of the doctor and also made a stamp from the surgery to authenticate the policy.
It's a simple fact of life that accidents do happen. But thanks to insurance policies, in many cases we are entitled to compensation for these unforeseen mishaps. Local councils see more than their fair share of personal injury claims. But Haringey Council know better than most that when it comes to compensation, some people are never satisfied. In 2008, they received a complaint from local resident Barbara Farai.
Mrs. Farai claimed that she fell over while she was walking with her granddaughter. She claimed that she tripped and she fell and she hurt her knee. And she said she tripped and fallen on a broken paving stone.
With the level of wear and tear that road and pavements are subjected to, incidents like this are inevitable. So Haringey Council began their usual procedure for such a claim and launched an inquiry.
Homes of Haringey didn't dispute the fact that she had fallen, that she had suffered injuries, and the council, when it investigated that claim, found that it had been negligent in maintaining that section of pavement.
So, we have a genuine claim for a fall that actually happened, and the council had admitted negligence. Sounds like a textbook case for compensation. What could possibly go wrong?
Her initial claim was for damage to her knee. The council made an offer which was approximately £7,500, on the basis that Homes for Haringey's assessment of the injuries were that it would have resolved itself within a 3 to 6 month timescale.
£7,500 for an injured knee seems fair enough, but Barbara Farai didn't agree and decided to take matters into her own hands.
She submitted her own medical expert opinion to say that she was severely incapacitated by the fall and the injuries were likely to be ongoing and severe. We sent Mrs. Farai to our own medical experts who agreed that her injuries were substantial and likely to be continuing beyond the initial 3 to 6 months original prognosis.
In light of the revised assessment of her injuries, Barbara Farai submitted a new claim for compensation. Although it's fair to say that the amount she was asking for isn't quite what the council were expecting.
Mrs. Farai claimed that her quality of life had altered so substantially that her claim had risen to approximately £740,000.
For those of you who aren't mathematically minded, that's almost 100 times the figure that Barbara Farai was originally offered. But how did she get to such an inflated amount?
She claimed her husband had to give up his work to care for her 24 hours a day. She claimed for additional care support beyond her family. It was for out-of-pocket expenses, for taxis, for additional expenses as a result of not being able to live her life normally as she claimed to have done before.
The level of care and assistance that Barbara Farai was claiming for was so extensive that Haringey Council began to have serious doubts about the legitimacy of her claim, so they decided to investigate further.
We made a decision to put Mrs. Farai under surveillance to see if what she was claiming was actually true in her day-to-day life. It was felt that Mrs. Farai thought that she was being followed and resorted to using crutches and getting support from her family members. However, when she felt like that she wasn't being followed, the crutches were dispensed with and she was able to walk normally, including carrying heavy bags of shopping up and down the hill, entering the house without difficulty. So the surveillance activity in this case we felt was, not only was it justified, it supported the Homes for Haringey's case against Mrs. Farai.
With the video evidence clearly showing that Barbara Farai's claims were untrue, her case for compensation was falling down. And as Haringey Council's investigations continued, they discovered the severity of her injuries weren't the only thing that Mrs. Farai had been less than truthful about.
Mrs. Farai's original statement made no mention of the fact that she had an existing condition of arthritis which affected her knee. Both her own medical expert and Homes for Haringey's insurer's medical expert agreed that they had both been misled by Mrs. Farai and revised their statements accordingly.
Barbara Farai's case was on dodgy ground, but she still had one last chance to set the record straight.
We presented the video surveillance to Mrs. Farai and her solicitor and invited her to revise her assessment of the £740,000 claim. Mrs. Farai declined that, and so the case went to court.
So, from an original offer of £7,500 for a legitimate claim, Barbara Farai's greed and fraudulent actions landed her in front of the judge in the High Court.
The judge made an assessment that her injuries were unlikely to continue beyond 3 months, and in his opinion, the claim should have amounted to no more than £1,500. As opposed to the £740,000 that she eventually claimed. In fact, the judge was of the opinion that she wasn't entitled to claim anything.
But unfortunately for Mrs. Farai, that was just the beginning.
After the judge had said that Mrs. Farai had lied to the court and to him, Mrs. Farai and her husband were found guilty of contempt of court. Mrs. Farai received a 3-month custodial prison sentence. The judge awarded costs to be paid by Mrs. Farai to Homes for Haringey of £100,000.
It's hard to believe, but what had begun as a genuine case for compensation had spiralled into a landmark legal case that sent a clear warning to anyone tempted to exaggerate a personal injury claim.
We're not an easy target. We will investigate any and all cases that we think are made fraudulently, and we will always seek the heaviest penalty.
Still to come, surprising discoveries.
Just stumbled across something that's quite important. It will have a big impact on the local community.
And a summer holiday scam.
What set out to be a family holiday in Lanzarote, it turned into a nightmare for her.
Owning a pet can be an expensive business. The good news is that a pet insurance premium can cover unforeseen vet bills and even pay out in the event that your furry friend is lost or passes away. But inevitably, some people have seen these policies as a means of pocketing a few quid. And in 2005, the insurance company Agria dealt with a policyholder who, it would turn out, lost pets with staggering regularity.
So the policyholder was a traveller who lived in Scotland, and part of the complication of the case was that he had multiple addresses. So very difficult to pin him down, very difficult to tie one address to another. The first claims received from this policyholder were for 2 St Bernard puppies. Now they were worth £850 each, and they'd just been lost.
Losing a set of keys or a £10 note is one thing, but to misplace a pair of St Bernard puppies, that really takes some doing. With no vet's records and a dubious set of circumstances, Agria had their doubts too.
It was very suspect. We just couldn't gather the evidence to prove that the puppies hadn't existed or the policyholder didn't own them. So the ultimate resolution to that was that we paid the case.
So that's one claim and one payout. Of course, it may have just been bad luck. However, less than a year later, another claim form landed on Agria's doorstep from the same policyholder. This time, it was £350 for a poodle puppy that had died. But once again, the details were sketchy at best.
It had an illness, but it hadn't seen a vet, so we couldn't establish that the animal actually existed or that the policyholder had owned the animal. And then when the animal died, there wasn't a veterinary certificate because the vet hadn't certified it dead.
With the claim raising so many unanswered questions, Agria rejected it and didn't pay the policyholder a penny.
It is possible that the policyholder could have been very unlucky. I think with the lack of pushback from them, perhaps we'd called or made the right call in that instance.
But this wasn't the last that Agria heard from the claimant, because just over 18 months later, they received another claim form. This time it was an encore of the Disappearing Dog Act, except that this one was a pedigree bulldog worth over £2,000.
The policyholder had set the puppy loose in the back garden, come back 10 minutes later, and the puppy was missing.
The puppy was actually a year old, but that wasn't the only thing about the claim that didn't quite add up.
Quite bizarrely, for a year-old animal, it had never seen a vet, so it had no veterinary records, and when the breeder had submitted the purchase receipt, surprisingly, it had got lost in the post.
Suspicious that the missing bulldog was in fact just a load of bull, Agria decided to investigate.
We'd sent the loss adjusters out. They couldn't verify that the puppy had or hadn't been lost, so on a balance of probabilities, we settled the claim.
So that's 3 claims and 2 payouts to the same policyholder. But just over a year later, Agria's paths crossed with the claimant once again, when they spotted something on the paperwork which set alarm bells ringing.
When the claim form came in, it was from a completely different address, from a completely different policy holder, but on the front of the claim form was one of the addresses that the previous policy holder had been using, and that address was given as the address of the breeder of the puppies. So instantly there, with the past history, there were suspicions raised.
Unsurprisingly, Agria wasted no time in investigating the claim, but when they visited the owner, they made a rather unusual discovery.
There was no indication that dogs had ever lived there in terms of bowls, in terms of leads, in terms of baskets, in terms of dog food. So we were highly suspicious.
After the visit, the owner ceased all communication with Agria, and with zero evidence that the dogs ever even existed, the case was closed. So that's 4 claims and 2 payouts. But you've guessed it, that wasn't the last time Agria dealt with what had to be the world's unluckiest dog owner.
In this instance, it was a pug puppy, and the pug puppy had got parvovirus. So this was a claim for veterinary fees. The puppy did subsequently die, but initially on the original claim, parvovirus is something that the insurance policies expect owners to vaccinate the animal against. Probably because of the nature of this dog owner, this breeder, this dog dealer, he hadn't bothered with the vaccinations. So no vaccinated puppy, no, we declined the claim.
This time, the owner's track record of never taking his dogs to the vet had backfired. And further investigations revealed he had another 6 policies in place ready to make claims on. Although as far as Agria was concerned, this dog had had its day.
But if people are determined to defraud insurers, sometimes they'll find a way. Luckily, in this instance, we stopped 3 cases, stopped potential 6 others. The downside of that was we paid 2.
In January 2012, the police joined the fight against insurance fraud by forming an elite squad known as IFED, the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department.
I would say to anyone who's considering committing insurance fraud that now this is no longer a crime without consequence that it may have been in the past. There is a dedicated 40-strong unit known as IFED that work 24/7 hunting down insurance fraudsters.
They've made over 450 arrests and have saved millions of pounds in fraudulent insurance claims, money which ultimately goes back in our pockets. From now on, fraudsters need to watch their backs.
So if you're thinking about it, I suggest think again. There's every chance you'll get an IFED detective come knocking on your front door.
It's 5:30 a.m. and a team of IFED officers are on their way to give another suspected fraudster one of their unique wake-up calls. A man Taylor is heading up today's operation.
This morning we're going to an address to effect an arrest, hopefully of a male who we need to speak to regarding an insurance claim for the theft of his tools. They've subsequently paid him out £1,000 on the first occasion, and he's gone on to submit a further 3 claims, and they've paid out £1,000 in total.
It was the multiple claims on the suspect's contents insurance that led IFED to suspect foul play.
What we'll look to do this morning is to go in, arrest our suspect, and then search for any items relating to any offence, particularly fraud.
Having arrived at the address, the team prepare to go in.
We're from the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department of the City London Police, and we need to speak to him, all right?
The person who's answered the door is claiming the suspect is at work, but IFED officers are a tenacious bunch and have persuaded the person at the door to call the suspect. He's now on his way home and can look forward to a warm welcome from the IFED boys on his return.
He's at work, he's working night, so we've just phoned him and he's coming back. He'll be back within the hour so that we can hopefully speak to him there.
Sure enough, just under an hour later, the suspect arrives home.
You're under arrest on suspicion of fraud by false representation, okay? don't have to say anything at moment defence, you do what I mean, to win question, something which you later line in court, and anything you do so maybe giving evidence, all right? But what we need to do is we need to search inside, all right? So we're looking for some items in particular. We'll supposed to speak to you about exactly the items that we're looking for once we get inside.
Got a warrant?
What?
Got a warrant?
No, we're going to search his property under Section 32 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, all right? That means so we can search for any items that we believe are relevant. We can search for any evidence at all, actually, under Section 32 for the place that you immediately come from, which is your home address.
With the legalities out of the way, the search gets underway, but the cameras remain outside. Almost an hour later, a man emerges from the property, having made an interesting discovery.
Some receipts there, one for £100, and just some paperwork and his mobile phone. The reason we seized his mobile phone is because we believe that any photographs that have been taken of tools are more than likely going to have been taken on the mobile phone. So what we do is we take that back to the police station, we'll download all the data from it, and then from that we can pick the bones out of it and see what information we want from the data from the phone.
But weeding out documents isn't the only success of the day, because the team have also unearthed something that the local police will be very keen to take a look at.
One of the DC's gone out to the shed out in the back, there's like a little outbuilding. He heard some whirring from inside, and then our suspect has said that he's growing 50 cannabis plants there. So what we're doing now is I've called the local police force down to assist us with some uniform officers to dismantle it and seize it. What we'll do is we'll probably seize all of the plants and then from that take a specific sample, but it'll be a crime that will be more than likely investigated by police.
For Aman and IFED, it's an unusual bonus. After all, it isn't every day they arrest a suspected fraudster with green fingers.
It's quite a sophisticated setup, so he's obviously taken quite a bit of time to put that together. The door's key-coded to get in, which is totally unique, something that I've not seen before in 9 years of policing.
As local police units arrive, the cannabis farm is dismantled and bagged up as evidence. As far as IFED is concerned, though, today was all about bringing a suspected insurance scammer to justice, and Aman is happy with the way the raid has gone.
I think we've got more than enough to look at going forward. Obviously, we won't know until we interviewed him, till he's given an account of what he's got to say.
As the last of the cannabis plants are removed, Aman reflects on the morning's events.
Yeah, it's been a good result all round. Just stumbled across something that's quite important. Although not important to our case, it's still it'll have a big impact on the local community.
Every year, thousands of us Brits pack up and head off on our holidays. But unforeseen circumstances can mean that even the most perfectly planned trip away never gets off the ground. Thanks to travel insurance policies, we don't have to be out of pocket when disaster strikes. Although in 2013, the officers at the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department discovered someone who saw these policies as a means of lining their pockets.
Joanna Hunt is a case we dealt with last year. She was a mother of 3 children, and she booked a holiday to go to Lanzarote. She booked this holiday 2 weeks before the flight, and within 2 days she'd taken out 7 policies of insurance to insure her risk against travel. A couple of days before she was due to set off, one of her children became unwell, and she took that child to see her GP. And the GP agreed that the child was unwell and would be unfit to travel.
A child falling sick is one of those things that just can't be helped. But with 7 insurance policies in place, Joanna Hunt was able to help herself. And that's precisely what she did.
She made the claim on the policies. So the insurance company sent her the claim forms, and she made a claim on all 7 policies. So the holiday cost $1,600, and had she have been paid out on all 7, she would have been making about £11,000.
Almost £9,000 profit in the space of a few weeks wouldn't have been bad going. But fortunately, defrauding insurance companies isn't that easy.
The fraud was uncovered when the insurance companies, they do talk to each other, and they communicated that they were all about to pay out on a policy. So when they discovered that, they froze the payouts and they referred the case to ourselves.
With IFED now running the investigation, Joanne Hunt was brought in for questioning.
Joanne Hunt gave an explanation in interview which had to be checked out, so we went to see her GP. He confirmed that yes, he had seen the young daughter and she had been unwell. The 7 claim forms were shown to the GP, and whilst he confirmed that he had signed one of the policies, he also said that the other 6 were forgeries of his own signature. In order to commit this fraud, Joanna Hunt had to forge several documents. The first one, of course, was the policy of insurance. She had to lie on that form to say she hadn't taken out other policies. She forged the signature of the doctor and also made a stamp from the surgery to authenticate the policy.
There was never any dispute over the fact that Joanne Hunt's child was unfit to travel. But because she'd lied and forged documents to claim on multiple policies, IFED were now dealing with a clear-cut case of fraud. But of course, Joanne Hunt had what she thought was a fair explanation of her actions.
At the time, I don't think she realised how serious this case was, but when she was interviewed in the police station by IFED detectives, she tried to explain that the reason why she took out the 7 policies wasn't in order to commit a fraud. She thought that she'd take out the 7 policies so that when the paperwork arrived, she would then look at the small print and then decide which policy she wanted to continue to take out. The remaining 6, she said she was intending to cancel, but she didn't. And she went on to claim on all 7 policies.
Unsurprisingly, IFED didn't buy Joanne's excuses, and so she was charged with 7 counts of fraud by misrepresentation.
Well, by the time she got to court, she realised that the court may not have accepted her excuses, and having taken legal advice, she pleaded guilty in court. She was sentenced to a suspended prison sentence, and she also received community service and a fine and costs.
Like so many other scammers, Joanne Hunt had been seduced by greed and the prospect of making easy money. But she discovered the hard way that fraud is a crime which doesn't pay.
Joanne Hunt was a young mother, 28 years old, mother of 3 children. So what set out to be a family holiday in Lanzarote, it turned into a nightmare for her, and she's lost her good name for life.
Having investigated cases like this for the past 2 years, Dom knows full well what the consequences of insurance fraud can be.
I think generally the fraudsters who commit these crimes, they do think it is a faceless crime, but in fact every person in the country who has a policy of insurance, whether it be for travel, whether it be household, whether it be health, we are all paying the extra on our policies because of these fraudsters.
With £2 billion a year lost through insurance fraud, companies are doing all they can to fight back. But one of the biggest problems they face is that lengthy investigations cost time, money and resources, which could be devoted to legitimate claims. The key to winning this battle is to try and identify fraudulent cases as quickly as possible. And one of the ways insurers are doing this is by using the likes of Sally Griffiths and her team of desktop investigators who are trained to spot dodgy claims over the phone.
What we're really listening out for is what they say, but also how they say it. Signs of nervousness, hesitation, any indication at all that the customer is perhaps buying time or being evasive, using like certain techniques that we call parroting, repeating the question back so that we know that there's something not quite right, they can't answer the question fluidly.
But the advantages of these techniques don't end there, because Sally's team have also managed to identify which type of insurance fraudsters think is the easiest target.
People believe that it's easier to commit travel insurance fraud without getting caught, and also they believe that it's not going to affect their no-claims discount as it would do for a motor or a household claim.
And believe it or not, travel insurance fraud can even be affected by the weather.
During the summer months, we do have an increase in claims coming through as people are obviously going on holiday. A particular trend that we saw last year involved the nice weather that we had in England, and we found that there was an increase in cancellation claims. So it seemed that people were cancelling their overseas holidays in order to save money on that holiday and then stay at home and enjoy the sunshine here.
So for anyone who thinks that conjuring up a bogus claim on their holiday insurance could be a nice little earner, Sally has some words of warning.
People think that making a false traveller's insurance claim is going to be really easy. They can just come on the phone and speak to someone and all be done and dusted. The reality is, if they're speaking to a trained investigator, every lie that they say will be picked up on and they'll be caught out.